In this video, I'm going to address a question sent by Armin, and he says, I'm wondering if you can help me to make sense of a couple verses I haven't been able to reconcile. In the King James Version, Matthew 18:3, it says, "Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." And in King James Version, Matthew 8:12, it says, "But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." This one kind of got me for a minute, and I'll tell you all the things I did. I went into Bible Gateway and typed in just that passage of Matthew 8:12, looked at all of the different translations to see if I was missing something. I went back into the previous chapter, Matthew 7, to see if there was some sort of contextual piece that I was missing. I went into Blue Letter Bible and looked up the root word for children and kingdom. And I also went to the other books of the Gospels to see if there was, sometimes, like, depending on the scribe who's recounting the story, you get different aspects or you get different language that's being used. So sometimes a story is recounted one way in Matthew, and then there's like a different angle in Luke or John, etc. I didn't get anything, but here's what the Lord led me to. In Matthew 18:3, "Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." We know that God is talking about the humility of a child in that context. And we know that because, I'm just going to pull from the NIV, because he says, "He called a little child to him and placed the child among them, and he said, Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child," so that's what he's talking about, the humble position of the child, "is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes such a child in my name welcomes me." You can take a child and make an example of a child in different ways, right? If a child is, is like teething or something and they go around biting everybody, you could make a different kind of example of a child. You could say, you see this child right here? Don't do what this child is doing. They're being a booger. They don't have understanding yet. Don't go sinking your teeth into people's skin. So that's one example you could use. But Jesus decided in this situation that he wanted to use the humility of a child as his example. In the other situation, he's using something else. In Matthew 8:12, he says, "But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So we know that he's using children in that context in an unfavorable way. So I tell you a lot of the time that there's a difference between being childish and childlike. Jesus wants us to be childlike, not childish. So let's look at the context within this chapter. And I have the NIV pulled up. It doesn't really matter from the NIV to the King James. There's nothing specific in there that's going to help us to understand. So I'm going NIV. I encourage you, there are some things in King James Version and in all of the versions that are problematic. So use different versions so that you, and whatever you're most comfortable with. If you've been reading King James and that's where you know most scriptures, then great, use that. But be Spirit-led and know that King James has the word Easter in it. That should be a red flag to us that it has the word Easter in it, because Easter is not celebrated the same as God's Passover, and he uses the language of Passover for a very specific reason. We need to understand what Passover means. So for that reason, I am so disenchanted with the King James Version. It makes me very upset that anyone's changing the scroll. And yet, I've found trouble with every version, or just about. So just make sure you're Spirit-led. If you have memorized most versions and you're most comfortable with King James, that's okay. Just be aware of these issues. And also be aware that there are people, messengers of Satan, who like to go around telling everyone that King James is the most accurate version of the Bible, and they are repeating something from Catholicism, because obviously Catholicism has had influence over the King James version. So don't believe that nonsense. All right, so let's go to NIV, just NIV, because that's what I'm most comfortable with. Everyone has the version that they feel most comfortable with and that they've memorized most of the verses from, so go with that. That's perfectly fine. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly. Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Okay, I want to just point out here, he is highlighting the faith of this centurion. He's highlighting the maturity of this man's faith. That's what he's praising here. So the other context, he talked about childlike humility. Here he's going to talk about the difference between those who are mature in their faith versus those who are childish in their faith. Truly, I tell you, I've not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom, subjects of the kingdom is how this is written in NIV. In King James, it says, but the children of the kingdom. And I honestly think that that's the better translation. If you look at the root word or the original word in Strong's, you're going to see that word is huios, and it is most often translated to son, child, son of man, son of God. So it's child is the most appropriate in my personal opinion. Or son, you could say son. So he has said, I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects, the sons, or the children of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, if we take that original word that was used in this context, I think children is most helpful because Jesus has spoken about being childlike, and he's spoken about being childish. Paul, likewise, speaks about maturity of faith. He talks about, I've given you spiritual milk, spiritual food. You're not yet ready for solids. He speaks in those terms as well. So children is, I believe, the most appropriate use of within this context. But the children of the kingdom, those who are not mature, those who are not living their faith, those who are childish in their faith. He has just gotten done demonstrating that the centurion is mature in his faith. Those who are childish and not mature in their faith will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus said to the centurion, go, let it be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. Another thing that I want to mention to you is that in the word, we see that Jesus went through certain towns where he couldn't perform any miracles because the faith was so lacking in those towns. But here, his servant, the centurion's servant, was healed at that very moment because of his faith, because of the maturity of his faith. And he uses that centurion to demonstrate these are the people who are going to come from the east and the west to sit at that feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the children, those who are childish in their faith, will not. They'll be outside that door where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I hope that helped to clarify. Thank you for the question. It actually really challenged me. I had to really sit with this for a minute and pull out all of my tools. And the cool thing is that even though none of those tools actually, revealed anything, I sat here and I said, okay, Lord, surely you know how to reveal this to me, and that's your will. So that that's exactly what he did. And I love every time that God reveals his glory. So thank you for that opportunity.